We stand against totalitarianism, particularly imperialist expansionist totalitarianism. We are for democracy and human rights, and we are for a worldwide prosperity that only free economies can give, and the pursuit of human happiness that only political freedom allows.
Welcome to the Andrea Shaffer Show. Today I'm very pleased to invite my guest, Ron Coleman. Ron Coleman, it's great to see you. For my audience that may not know Ron Coleman, he's a constitutional lawyer. He's argued with success all the way up to the Supreme Court. He has formerly worked with Harmeet Dillon on civil rights issues, cases, and he's also an expert in intellectual property and copyright law. Welcome, Ron. How are you today?
I'm all right, thanks. How are you? Great to see you.
I'm doing great. Thank you. It's really nice to see you face to face finally. It's
Right.
awesome. It's awesome. We met a couple of years ago, communicated back and forth right after October 7th, and we started sharing some things. And then from there, we just developed our relationship. Ron's a wonderful man. He's down to earth. His humor is just, I love his humor.
I know I am one of the funniest men in the world. That I won't push back on.
I know. And it's really
Let's see if we can
refreshing.
get Andrea to crack a smile. She is such a stiff. We've got 45 minutes here to get it.
Okay, let's get going. But thanks for the smile. The last thing I want to say before we move into what we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about the unrest on the street. We're going to talk about the article that Ron Coleman put out, I think it was on the 25th, in regards to, is it time to invoke the Insurrection Act? And then what has transpired since. We have seen riots in the streets in LA over the weekend. In fact, the disruptors and anarchists barricaded the ICE agents in the federal building. It was quite chaotic. I don't know if you saw that, Ron.
No.
Yeah. And then if we have time, we're going to go over the recent development there in Georgia where the FBI raided the Fulton County Board of Elections, which is really important. Ron's been following this since 2020, so have I, and so have many other people. So hopefully at some point we will get to the point of justice. So welcome, Ron. Let's start with your article and why you state that it might be time to invoke the Insurrection Act.
Well, I have been updating this article that I originally wrote in connection with the Portland disorder in 2022. And in fact, it was originally published in Human Events. It was 2020. I wasn't necessarily urging the invocation of the Insurrection Act, but I was defending, at the time, the president's right, and as I felt at the time, and as I feel now, duty to protect the civil rights of non-rioting Americans who are basically being victimized. Yes, there's an issue of vindicating federal supremacy legally, constitutionally, statutorily, all those things. But also when anarchy is permitted to take over a part of any civilization, it's by definition, civil rights that are guaranteed by governments are being violated. People go on the road, they have to, updating it to 2026, 2025, 2026, people in and around Minneapolis are finding themselves being pulled out of cars, stopped on the road, being vetted for the acceptability of their travel by non-state actors who are being either implicitly or explicitly assisted by local law enforcement. That's where it gets to be insurrection, when the local authorities refuse to enforce the laws that are put in place to protect civilians from violence, from intimidation, from coercion. The federal government is obligated to take action.
So that's one of the major responsibilities of the federal government is to protect the citizens' national security, and it's getting out of hand right now. What I'm watching is we have Mikey Sherrill from New Jersey. Is it New Jersey? Yeah.
Yes, my state. That's where I'm sitting right now.
Have you been following it?
Yeah, she's going all in, as all Democrats, all the new wave Democrats have concluded that their future in the party requires them to be completely signed up for whatever insurrectionist conduct is demanded by the fringe. It's not even really a fringe of the Democratic Party anymore.
Right, exactly. And then I'm watching also, there was a mayor, I don't know what his name is, in Los Angeles over the weekend, also say, inciting, encouraging to refuse to work with law enforcement and to actually impede and obstruct. So let's go back to your article and let's go through the history a little bit and what laws specifically that can be invoked in order to protect the citizens and what laws are being violated. So I have here, citizens are also entitled to speak freely. This goes back to what Don Lemon did a couple weeks ago. Citizens are entitled to speak freely, to assemble freely, to worship freely, and under the Fifth Amendment, to travel. In fact, under 18 U.S. Code 3241, it is a federal offense to conspire to injure, oppress, and threaten to intimidate any person.
And it makes it illegal for two or more persons to go in disguise on the highway. That means wearing masks. I don't know how the courts have the extent to which courts have required a disguise in enforcing that law, I don't know. Or on the premises of another with intent to prevent or hinder his free exercise or enjoyment of any right or privilege under the Constitution. And it is kind of interesting, the use of masks by Antifa beginning in 2020 and continuing through the present gives you Anti-Klan Act power as well, which as you know, is being used in certain circumstances. This is, the conduct is out there, the failure of the state to enforce the laws out there. There is obviously a reason that the White House has not yet taken this action, and I think it's probably a well thought out reason, because I do know the people in the White House who, not all of them, but many of them who were involved in the conversation. They're very smart lawyers. They're very politically savvy. And one of the things I'm sure they realize is that the left wants this. The left wants a full-on clash. They clearly want the White House to invoke the Insurrection Act, and there has to be a reason that it hasn't done so. I don't know what the tactical reason is. I can speculate as well as you, but I frankly don't. I don't have a great idea. I think part of the reason I think it's hard to know why they have not yet done it is because they could be waiting for something to happen or waiting for some development that you and I are not aware of to continue. I will observe, however, that the extent and force and scope of federal pushback on local violence has definitely increased week by week. You can see the difference, the aggressiveness, and the numbers of people being arrested. Part of it might also have to do with figuring out jurisdictionally which are going to be places where they can expect litigation to happen. And tactically figuring out, there are judges who will do anything, including some of them who are judges who are appointed by Republicans, including Trump himself, who will sign off on anything that they think is going to make them heroes among the people that they hang out with socially. I've spoken on this topic before, the socialization of the judiciary in the United States. So those are just some of the variables that I imagine are being, I mean, just again, to interrupt myself, you've been such a patient listener.
No.
We saw last week that when it looked very much like the president was ready to invoke the act in Minnesota, he sent Tom Homan to Minnesota and achieved a relatively high level compared to what he had previously, the federal government had previously gotten, a relatively high level of cooperation at the state level. That is a very Trumpian kind of move. That's the kind of thing that you and I might not think to do because we're not deal makers. I mean, some lawyers are, but you and I are more litigators. If you can get cooperation without using force, you've won a lot and lost very little because you can always use force tomorrow. Once you use force, you have let loose certain energies and certain moments and certain political power, including the power that comes with restraint, that is hard to recover. What this week will show, as you mentioned, things have spread to Los Angeles. I mean, it's these cities, these large cities that have really been taken over by the extreme left in terms of governance, in terms of elites and populations, where really normal people can hardly live anymore. These are really the problem. Even the states in which in which these cities are located, the vast majority of residents in these states do not support what's going on. But
I think I don't know. I'm not inside the White House, Ron, but we saw the polls go in the negative for a while for Donald Trump. So strategically, they're probably looking at both. That's why they brought Tom Homan in. He's respected by both, or was respected by both parties. He received a medal of a civilian, I don't remember the exact Medal of Honor, from Obama of all people for his work. But also, what you're saying is we're watching it escalate. And I mean, Trump has been very strategic, and he's waiting to follow the rules of the book as far as the law, and waiting for them to make that next error. I would think.
Well, I mean, I think you might be right that there is a level of error that he's looking to have happen. I mean, they've certainly done enough in enough places that invocation of the act would seem to be appropriate already. I hate to think that he's waiting for a terrible thing to happen. I do, by which I mean, for example, a fatality among federal law enforcement officers. I do think that the extremely well-organized and prepared left-wing insurrectionists are moving with extreme care not to let that happen. They want everything, but they're not interested in eliminating any particular person. They don't care about people. They're interested in intimidating large swaths of the population. They know that if, God forbid, somebody gets killed, anything that is done against them will be justified. So both sides are playing a very, very close dance, waiting for the other side to make a mistake. One of the things I think, I mean, on the one hand, it's been distressing to see the extent of the preparation and the extent of the training And the arrogance of these people thinking that they have the right to lose elections but run affairs in places where they lose elections anyway by virtue of using terrorism and terrorist type tactics. It shouldn't be all that surprising to us. We saw it over the last 5 years. We saw it since the Trump election riots in 2016. So it shouldn't surprise us that much, but I do think they have been shown to be a lot less sophisticated than they. On the one hand, there's a high level of sophistication, higher than most people who are really paying attention might expect, but they've been easily infiltrated. They're easy to infiltrate. I mean, is it possible that there's a double game going on and that the real thing is really a level below what we're seeing being infiltrated? You know, you can speculate endlessly, but I do think there's been a lot of infiltration. I think the federal government and the FBI, to the extent that it has not been rendered useless by the woke policies, especially during the Biden years, they're still gathering information, and I think February is going to be a very big month for law enforcement. I think the arrest and the indictment of Don Lemon is extremely powerful proof that the government is playing a different game from what it's played until now.
Agree. I haven't seen anything like that in my lifetime, at least since I've been paying attention. So this will be interesting. I had Trevor Loudon on about a week ago, and he talked about, and I hope he's wrong, that the civil unrest is going to be nothing like we've experienced in the modern age. What he meant by that, I don't know. Maybe since the 1960s. I hope not. So that's a tinderbox waiting to explode too. And I'm sure that the White House is looking at all those aspects too, because that's not going to look good going into the midterms.
Well, it's not going to look good for whom, though? I mean, are Republican voters going to look at Donald Trump and say, this is his fault? No, they're not. Are Democrats who are vote Democrat? In other words, okay, we're talking about the middle. I don't have to go through this. We're talking about
the purple voters, yeah.
Right, the so-called swing voters. Is there really anyone in America whose mind is not made up, who is going to look at these events and say, I was going to vote Republican, but now I'm going to vote Democrat because Republicans are failing to prevent disorder? I mean, like, I don't really. I clearly there is a political goal here, but I don't see anything the Democrats are doing that makes it work for them. Their base is already motivated. But what I think, one thing that I do think that the administration and the federal authorities are doing well. I don't know if it's going to be fast enough, but I think it is already showing results, is they are really forcing the hand of the insurrectionary left to show their cards, to show what their intentions are. And it's early. It's only February. So as much of this as can get flushed out before the summer, the better placed the government will be in terms of law enforcement authority, an understanding of what has to be decided by what courts, by when. I think the schedule right now favors Republicans. But there's no question that your guest was right. This is meant to affect the future elections. And also, to a large extent, this is a result of how the changes that are being put in place by the Trump administration are devastatingly damaging for Democrats in future elections, because it turns out that each and every one of these actions, the ICE enforcement, the election law enforcement, all these things go to the cooking of America's electoral books over the last 12, 15, maybe 20 years that has been going on under administrations, both Republican and Democrat, for a very long time. And everyone has known about the marginal significance of it. It became non-marginal during the 2020 election. And what's happening now between what Harmeet Dillon is doing and Pam Bondi are doing, and what the Supreme Court is going to do in the very near future, and what the Census Bureau is going to do, it's a gigantic threat to the Democratic Party, and I don't think there's any way they can escape the day of reckoning, frankly.
So I think that's a good segue into talking about the elections, but let's hold that thought just for a moment. There's confusion out there. When does a state have sovereignty rights, and when does the federal have the power to go in and quell the unrest? Because I think that's where people are confused right now. I mean, the states do have, like in Minneapolis, it's a sanctuary city. So what does that mean?
There's nothing. It means nothing. It is a form of political masturbation. Mm-hmm. It is self-gratification by which municipalities announce their supposed virtue on the issue of free immigration, unless and until they are overwhelmed by actual immigrants, in which case, as has happened in New York and has happened in where was it, in Maine, when all those
Maine, Ohio, it's
there have been places where local authorities have said, forget, we're not doing this anymore. But no state has the power to exempt itself from the supremacy clause. We settled that in the 1860s during the Civil War. If people are confused, they're not really trying, Andrea. There simply is no issue. And if it's ironically, the Supreme Court in the last 15 or 20 years, especially during the Obama administration, very, very firmly came down on the side of the federal government as the sole enforcer of immigration law, really taking out of the states' hands any ability to protect themselves against foreign invaders, especially border states. So, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. There isn't. I mean, look, I think right now the tactical problem for the administration is these pockets of judicial resistance. The Ninth Circuit clearly has not yet gotten the message. And the Ninth Circuit used to be the worst. Now the First is the worst. There are still panels that can be put together in the Ninth Circuit, though, that come up with some really bad decisions, like one last week that the administration is obviously going to have to address immediately. The Fourth Circuit, there are still really, really bad judges out there, and that's going to have to be sorted out. But the issue of federal supremacy under the Constitution is settled, as is the ability of the federal government to use force, and under the Insurrection Act if necessary, and also not under the Insurrection Act, under the president's fundamental constitutional powers as commander-in-chief. There's really nothing the states can or should be able to do about it.
So did you see the ruling? It was a Biden judge too that was appointed in 2001, but there was a ruling, and she's pretty much the state of the city of St. Paul, and I think it was Minneapolis. Let me find it here. They filed an emergency, requesting an emergency TRO to get ICE out of Minneapolis, St. Paul, out of Minnesota, and she struck him down. And she's a Biden judge.
Well, some judges are absolutely prepared to do their jobs. And in fact,
Right.
I remind people frequently that even some of the most politicized, Trump-crazed, Trump derangement syndrome crazed judges like Judge Boasberg, when you take away the object, the kryptonite that makes them lose their what would otherwise be their judicial strength and common sense. I mean, they're actually perfectly decent judges, but that's a big when. That's a big condition. It's the moments when judges are asked to overcome their political biases that matters much more than the copyright trial that I tried in front of Judge Boasberg a year ago in Washington, where he was a complete gentleman, and both I and my client were conspicuously conservative people associated with certain parties having January 6th connections, and yet we had a very successful trial outcome, and he acted fairly and rationally. And yet on the other hand, you see the stuff that he's done, asking planes to turn around, and most judges, however, are really trying to do their jobs. And yes, as you mentioned, when it happens, it's a sweet thing to see, and it really gives you reason for hope.
So let's get into the elections. And you said there's some cases coming up to the Supreme Court. And then we watched the investigation, the FBI raid, Fulton County Board of Elections.
Wow.
Location. I mean, that was a sight to be seen. But going back, there was an earlier ruling at the Supreme Court in the last couple of weeks on giving more broader, reducing, I should say, the barriers on people filing election-related lawsuits in regards to standing. And then there's another Supreme Court ruling that's coming down the pike that's going to impact elections. So let's start with that real quickly, and then let's go into what happened in Fulton County. Because I remember you in 2020.
Yeah, in 2020, it was really a cynical, nasty game that the judiciary really as a whole was playing. And it was a lot like the crap that they as a group pulls and to some extent are still continue to pull with things like Second Amendment rights or abortion, where they will just call black white. And they'll just, they've got their story and they're sticking to it. And when it came to election challenges, their story that they stuck to was, you never have standing to bring an election challenge before the election because what you describe as the harm that you're going to suffer if we don't grant you relief is speculative. And if you bring it after the election, it's untimely. It's moot.
It's too late.
It's too late. And they did this so cynically and so almost universally. And finally, the Supreme Court said, how can you possibly enunciate a conception that a political candidate doesn't have standing to complain about election law violations that literally prevent him from being elected? And you have lunatics on the court, like the dissenters, the two regular, out to lunch justices, Sotomayor and Jackson, still drinking the Kool-Aid, still repeating the mantra, and utterly refusing to grapple with the fact that under their formulation, there is virtually no way to enforce either state or federal election law.
They essentially closed the window, period.
So that was reopened, and that's gigantic. That's gigantic.
Right. So getting back to Fulton County, for my audience that may not have been following the elections, may not have agreed.
Well, actually, there was another thing you wanted to mention before we got to Fulton
Oh yeah,
County.
the next one
Which
down
is
at the next ruling of the Supreme
so
Court.
Supreme
It's
Court
really important.
Supreme Court is going to make a decision regarding what do they call those districts? I have a mental block. This racially gerrymandered districts.
Yes, the gerrymandering.
Gerrymander-
Boulder was famous for that, and he's still doing it.
Gerrymandered districts that are gerrymandered for racial. Look, gerrymandering is a really, really dicey issue. The law doesn't look good no matter how you do it because it's really a political process. It's meant to be a political process. Every parliamentary democracy, every country that has democracy uses, to some extent, this goes with what Stalin said. I don't care so much about who votes. I care who counts the votes.
Right.
But the Supreme Court is almost certainly going to make a major change in the existing law regarding gerrymandering. That's not going to go well for the Democrats. And then we're finally lifting up the hood that has covered the conduct of some of the most egregious. I mean, Georgia, the state of Georgia has been absolutely, states like Minnesota and Georgia were once Republican strongholds. These are fundamentally conservative populations. And the mechanism for voting in both of these states has become so crooked and so the problem in both states, but far more in Georgia, is that it's been a bipartisan scam. And one of the really revolting things about Georgia is that Republicans have been in on the fix for a very long time, and everyone has known it. And amazingly, why? Because it works for them. They get their positions, and they promise not to. And I mean, this happens also in places like New York and New Jersey, where there is a nominal Republican presence, and a gigantic problem in South Jersey that the Republican leadership in my state has really got an understanding that they're not going to rock the boat over Democratic Party shenanigans. In Georgia, though, it has been absolutely shameful what they've done, and they've gotten away with it for years and years. And finally, it's happening. Finally, the Justice Department is getting a hold of the information. And a lot of people have said on social media, well, isn't it too late? Isn't all the information gone? The answer is no. A lot of the information is not gone. And also in the digital era, it's not nearly as easy to get rid of information as it once was.
So I have just a real quick list as far as what they gathered. All physical ballots from 2020 general election, including, and then it goes on and on, of all the different types of ballots. And then all tabulator tapes, which is really interesting because there's claims that many of those tabulator tapes are just missing or wrong. All ballot images. David Cross, if you know who he is, right? He was the one that got his hands on the ballot images early on, and then he was showing all the different errors. Also, all the voter rolls. I mean, this is going to be quite interesting. And what's more interesting,
it's already interesting.
I know, very interesting. And Garland Favorito, he's had that lawsuit forever, and there's just one impediment after another. So it's at the federal level now. It's going to change. It's going to change. I watched Michigan too, and I'm sure you did. As far as it appeared to me, at least, I don't know Michigan very well, but the Republicans are also in on the game too, or some of them.
Yeah, very, very much so. And I remember 2020. It was like time stopped, and which actually did. It did. The Democrats succeeded in getting time to stop. And you see why all these threads, everything we've discussed in the past half an hour, they all intersect, because any time a challenge was brought to these shenanigans, judges would say this is, there's no evidence. Which is, I mean, someone this morning posted on X, and your listeners, should know that's where I do most of my content creation, is on X. And someone posted, and I reposted, an argument that maybe was it you? Affidavits are evidence. You
Yes,
can't.
it wasn't me, but yes.
How can you say there was no evidence? And I tell you, so many people unfollowed me in November of 2020 because I was an election truther, an election denier. I was there in Philadelphia.
I know.
I saw the Philadelphia Board of Elections laugh in the face of a court order that required the Republican observers to be allowed to get close enough to the counting of mail-in ballots.
I watched all those videos every
Oh yeah,
year.
and that's another case that the Supreme Court had oral argument on last month, which was the mail-in ballot business and the election, this whole business with Election Day. Is there such a thing as Election Day?
Mm-mm.
When
No.
elections take place for 2 months and you're postmarking, you're accepting ballots whenever the hell they come in, and whatever number you need, you accept them until you don't
14
accept them.
days, 30 days, whatever the state is, depending on the state, right? You can't have elections like this. So what do you think? Do you think Pennsylvania is going to be the next? Because honestly, I don't know which state was worse. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania was really bad, really bad. I watched those numbers go up and down, and all of a sudden overnight you got 100,000 more ballots counted, and it
I don't
changed
know.
every day. I was recalculating the electoral college, hoping that things would change.
Well, I'll tell you one thing that does have me worried, which is that the manpower, the amount of lawyers needed by the Justice Department to get this job done isn't there. Now, they finally finished the Epstein nonsense.
Thanks for saying nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, it was always nonsense.
Yeah.
Always
it's not nonsense, the bad things that happen, but
bad things that
it was
happen.
a distraction.
It was a distraction. It was political gamesmanship.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the worst people involved in Republican politics played into it big time for their own personal benefit. And yeah, I listen. I'm glad. I like the idea that there has been an unusual level of, at the end of the day, of transparency finally achieved regarding a case that otherwise would not have ever seen the light of day, and the extent to which elites, overwhelmingly Democrats, were involved in that sick business. I'm fine with that all coming out, but the idea that it was something that had to halt all other national business, and that if not, it would be a problem for Donald Trump in the midterms, it was just so preposterous. The point is, though, that project is largely done, and the hundreds of DOJ personnel who were busy with that are able to now get to work on the stuff that has to be done. There's still people who have to be moved out of positions in DOJ and other agencies, but the work is underway. Good things are happening.
So as a lawyer, and you being involved with it and watching 2020, the investigation has started. They got the materials. Now they're gonna, go through everything the evidence. What do you anticipate going forward timeline?
It's a good
with
question.
Georgia and process.
It's a good question, and a lot of people are asking me about how does the Justice Department get around statutes of limitations here? A lot of this is old news. And I understand that the Justice Department and the White House have a plan to address this. If they didn't, they probably would have taken action sooner. I mean, they're not stupid. This is basic stuff. One of the answers that I'm seeing is that there has been ongoing conduct among the conspirators involved in this conduct, ongoing conduct to cover up the conduct. That extends the statute of limitations. I think it would be preposterous not to believe that that is the case, that has taken place. I'm sure it's taken place. Who doubts that it's taken place? What I think is going to be fascinating is just how wide the net is going to be cast, just who's involved in this. And it's a lot of people who call themselves journalists, and a lot of people who call themselves bipartisan, a lot of people who call themselves former Republican strategists, or even Republican strategists who no Republican has actually hired for many years.
Who would that be? Care to mention any names or no?
I'm not good enough with proper nouns to give you names.
Okay.
I have a mental block remembering names, but listen, a lot of the people in Georgia that we mentioned, this is all part and parcel. I mean, also not only Republicans, but I mean, people like Fannie Willis. I mean, they prosecuted Donald Trump
and 18 other people.
Jenna Ellis, my friend Jenna Ellis, and people are hard on Jenna Ellis. This is a woman who got no support from anyone else. Donald Trump asked her to do a lot. She did everything that was asked of her. She was really left out to dry. A lot of people like this have had to raise their own funds. God bless Rudy Giuliani. What happened to him is an absolute
Can that
tragedy.
be reversed in any way?
I'm sorry?
Can that be reversed anyway with Rudy?
Yeah, I think it is possible. I mean, I don't know about the judgment against him. It is, well, I mean, unless it can be demonstrated that it was obtained corruptly, which is entirely possible. It's entirely possible. So I think we are talking about epochal changes, and these changes and revelations are so massive that is precisely why Democrat Party leaders have unleashed the stuff we were talking about at the beginning of our discussion. This is why they have to take to the streets. This is why they're pulling, it's sort of like Bowman pulling that fire alarm in the Capitol. It's a perfect metaphor for what Democrats are doing in the whole country. They have
So I
got
want
to
to get back to Jenna Ellis real quick.
Yeah.
I was hard on her at first, but I backed down because I mean, I had no idea what was going on in the background. I don't know what kind of pressure she had in regards to her personal situation, her family, what she was getting from her colleagues, or the people that were involved as far as throwing those charges at her. I mean, I don't know. I'm not in her shoes. So I backed down. I think personally I probably wouldn't have pled guilty, but I don't know. I've never been in that situation. So I backed away.
It's a really important point to say that you've never been in that situation. Everyone online is really, really brave, and especially the ones who are anonymous. This is what I do. This is what I would do. This is what Trump has no guts. This one has Pam Bondi has no guts. They say from behind their masks, okay, or from the comfort of their desktops. It's really hard to really stand up and do what's right when the pressure is on, and it's going to happen.
But not in that case. I mean, not in that situation.
It's there's a very strong argument for staying out of prison, almost no matter what you're threatened with. I give Steve Bannon, who is frankly not on my list of leading citizens by any stretch of the imagination, but I give him credit for hunkering down and doing his politically motivated time in prison rather than buckle. But it's a huge ask for most people, and for a woman to say to her that she, and again, she was just left out to dry. So, to be judgmental, again, I'm friends with her, so I'm biased, but I think there are a lot of people who, that's what social media is all about, is everyone's takes and everyone's, summing up of other people and their conduct and their choices. But I think major things are going to be happening in the next few months. It's going to be a glorious time to be alive.
It's been a glorious time to be alive since election night, or 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, whenever it was that it was pretty good. I mean, the confirmation was there. He was winning. We just didn't know by how much, and I wake up every day, really excited to get on with my day. It doesn't feel like I have a dark black cloud looming every day like it did for the last 4 years. Well, actually, 2026. 5 years since the 2020 election. It's a different day.
Absolutely.
Would you like to bring up anything else before we close out tonight? I always ask my guests, is there anything that we didn't bring up that is important to you that you really
I appreciate it. No, I mean, I think I think it is really important and I think we did it. If I don't say so myself, a pretty decent job of connecting some of the dots involving these issues. They're all interrelated. This is all, again, a fire alarm, an emergency for the Democrats. They lost on ideology a long time ago. They succeeded in indoctrination, and that's a real problem for us. What's going on in the colleges, what's going on in the judiciary, what's going on in the political cadres, what's going on in the schools is a disaster. Of all the things that are going on now, fixing what has been done to the minds of students, both in public schools and the universities over the last 20 years, is going to be extremely difficult. After World War II, there was a denazification process that had to be undertaken in Nazi Germany, because for 20 years, German students had been taught a way to look at the world. And it's a real question, what the Germany that we have today isn't necessarily a win. They're not Nazis, but it's not necessarily a healthy political, social environment there.
I obviously didn't live through that, but I pulled up curriculum from Florida, and I'm sure it's in other states too, after that time era, on educating the students on communism and the evils of it. And that kind of just went out the window. I don't know when, though. I mean, I haven't been in college since the early 90s.
Get out. You were only 10.
Well, that was my undergrad. I'm sorry.
I thank you very much for the opportunity to chat with you. And I'm looking forward to our continuing interactions and learning from each other on the internet about the law, about what's going on in this crazy world of ours. And I wish you the best of continued good luck and fortune and success with the podcast.
You too. I wish you luck on your law firm. I hope
Thank
it's
you.
really busy. And definitely. And thank you very much, Ron. And thank you for tuning in today. I do have a speaker coming on board next week in regards to the indoctrination of our children. So stay tuned for that. She used to be a school teacher, and now she has her own 501(c), and she has disclosed all these different ways of indoctrinating the children, but also gives solutions on actions for parents going forward.
All right.
So thank you, Ron.
You're welcome. See you.
In faith and freedom, God bless everyone here in America
Amen.
and around the world, and
See
have
ya.
a glorious day. Bye.
You too.
History shows that it is precisely when totalitarian regimes begin to decay from within, it is precisely when they feel the first real stirrings of domestic unrest,